Welcome to Portals of Perception, where we skate to the edge of what we know and we explore to reach for new perceptions, to grasp and understand and appreciate what is currently emerging with humanity and the kind of insights and knowledge and practices that we can explore and embrace such that we become better instruments for our own lives and for the causes that we choose to support. Today I am with Ed Dowrick, and Ed and I have collaborated in recent events where we've had 20 or more people on a large Zoom global event, and Ed would generate live in the moment and will stream music as it emerged in him in the context of the flow of the workshop. We may be into a contemplative part of the workshop, we may be into a dialogue part, we may be into an exploration of a body of knowledge around the trace of history and the trace of evolution. And so the nature of the experience is evolving and changing. And the beauty of that experience with Ed was that he was able, alongside with Paul that we've had on another conversation, stream into the experience the conductive power of special music, but one that was not rehearsed and not created or produced before, but one that emerged live on point. And I've always been profoundly moved and fascinated by just the capacity to translate an experience and a feeling and an atmosphere into music, into rhythm, into tone, into a feeling and an atmosphere that comes through these. So Ed, welcome to this dialogue. I jumped right at the deep end by sharing from our recent experience. I don't believe in starting in the beginning. I believe in starting in the middle. So that's what I just did. What would you add to my opening by way of introducing yourself and whatever way you would bring yourself to the conversation, even based on where I started?
Yes. Well, I guess we can start with the idea of music, which was you gave the reference to. Initially, I don't think of the music as music. It's really an attempt to be with something and to be with the moment of something, and to be able to be participant and experience the moment, but also be witness to the moment, where one is able to be inside of something or to be participating in something, and at the same time to be listening to something and what it teaches about this, at least for myself, I can say this thing I find myself in, which is life. And the great question about what it is that is life. And that's the first place. So music itself, or at least that extension that we call music, whether it's a piano or a violin or a flute or the human voice, it's this means of exploring and questioning, full of the quality of trust in something that we live inside of, that as each year goes by, for example, when I go to sleep at night, that I wake up in the morning and I feel refreshed, or if I cut my finger and it suddenly heals within a day or two, and I realize I have no conscious part to play in that. Something else does it for me, but yet I live inside of it. And these questions start to promote this exploration into the domain of what we call music. in the sense that it is a language or a marriage attempt between what I would think of as causing realms, or things that are not seen but more or less felt, and bridging them with the carnality, or with the life that I experience. The touching in a piano, your fingers are touching wood keys, but there's a theater of watching the hands as they touch the keys, and it itself becomes a dance, and you're witnessing it through these eyes, or through eyes, and then you're hearing sound, and it has a speed. It causes a feeling. Someone may start to speak a sentiment or something that's moving them, and just like in music, tuning forks, where you have a tune, an A here, and it vibrates A here, something someone speaks about resonates in you, and you feel it, and you're with that person, or you're with that moment that they're describing, and suddenly your system, or your hands, or your mind begin to want to do that dance, to kind of fully explore it. And all of these elements that I started to speak about earlier, which is this continued gain of trust, the exploration of the senses, the exploration of the senses with thoughts and sentiment, and how we interact, the embracing of how different we are, the embracing of the unknown, and the love of the unknown, the love of being able to go into a circumstance and feel awkward, the opportunities that I've had to be able to play live in the moment, unrehearsed, are the most precious moments, because I believe they're the moments when we can actually grow into something that we've never experienced before, or stretch beyond what is in our, say, our footlocker thus far. And the music as a media and as an extension, I would call it an extension domain, because ultimately I believe the human is the instrument, and we create these little technologies like the violin at the neck to perhaps amplify or fine tune or give nuance to something that emits from this part of the human being, or maybe something that comes through the hands that we don't see. Ultimately, this sense of wanting to companion and be with something, and to be participant at the point in something, but also to be witness of it at the same time. And from there, it has led for me an expanding range of appreciation of the variety and difference that each human being is, that each thing that's we see on the planet is, from the oceans to the birds to the sky to seasons to interactions with people, and ultimately all of these things being translated, at least in one of the chosen theaters that I would call theater, is music, which has offered me a better media than, for example, football, at least for me at this time.
So you talk there about the human as the instrument, and you started and you did the full loop to come back to the sense of being with, the sense of witnessing, the sense of participating. And we want to explore these three adjacent senses further. But if you need to trace the arising, the emergence of that conversation that you are inside of in yourself with this, what you call an extension, a domain extension, a media extension, where do you trace the spark of this in your journey, to the degree that you can share some of the biographical or whatever highlights? So where is this journey beginning for you, and how is it evolving? Just to get to know you a little bit more, and then thread back to some of the themes you touched.
Well, some of it is a mystery, and often will think that each person is very unique and different, and for each person, one's attracted to yellow, one's attracted to green, one's attracted to blue. So there's the mystery of that. So when I was very young, I spent a lot of time in the forests. As when I say young, like 5 years old, I used to go out by myself into the forests, the woods, and sit by the creek. And there was a tree there that I spent a huge amount of time with as a young child. And I used to basically talk to this tree, because when I was little, I thought that it could hear me, and I thought that God lived in the tree. And I used to climb up in the tree to get to the top of the tree to see what I could see, what it would show me, and started to develop this friendship with this tree and this whole landscape. And there were very, very special experiences that I could talk about for hours, but I won't. um, and when I had to leave, it became dark. It was dinner time. You know, you can't stay out I couldn't stay out all night. I used to come back, and I wanted to be with my friend, the tree, and everything around it, because to me it was alive. And
Which part of the country was it in?
this was in Pennsylvania, suburban Pennsylvania, south of Philadelphia. For those not familiar with the area, but Philadelphia area suburbs. So I say crick instead of creek. And I wanted this dialogue to continue. So when I went home, somehow there was an attraction always to music. My mother told me I asked for a piano when I was 5, and that I was too young and nobody would take me on as a student. So I got the drums instead. Someone took me on as a drummer, and I switched to the piano at age 7. So I've obviously, something beyond what I can really remember, has been attracted to music. No one had to force me towards it. I loved it. And anyhow, the way these bridged was I found that I could sit at the piano and I could play, and my mind could travel to the place, by the creek to the tree, and I could still be with that moment, or be with whatever those dialogues were there. And I'm later now, I didn't call them contemplations. As a child, I used to talk out loud to the tree. So I could play the piano, and I could also be at that place, and that conversation would continue. And as I've gotten older and older physically, I feel like the conversation has always been there and has never stopped. And instead of it just being the tree, it expanded. And I started to see the trees connected to other trees, and the tree is connected to the sky. It's connected to the creeks. It's connected not to Pennsylvania. It's connected to the United States. It's connected to the Americas and to the world. And it continues to grow, and it's connected to people. And as that range, for lack of a better word, expanded, I realized the conversation was always the conversation. And my next inquiry was, who is the conversation really between? And do I see it in other people? When I look in the eyes of people, I work in a hospital, and we'll work with a team of nurses and doctors. And sometimes I have the conversation there. It's happening in that theater. It's happening between a patient when we discuss talking about pains of growing older, and the moments of exchange between them. And I start to hear, as a musician would train to listen, you start to hear the conversation that I had as a child with the tree. It's just another facet. And the connection between these experiences and the music as a expressionary place grew together from when I was a child. So there was a link between this kind of a promotion that the music caused and allowed for, is probably a better word. It settled one aspect of me on one level, while another could explore has just grown. So the music as a domain has grown adjacently with these other conversations that are behind the love of the music, as if it becomes a mediator, or it becomes a way to participate and witness at the same time, where you're active on one level, but you're also listening on another. And you're accompanying, as a film score composer would say, you're companioning and enhancing the story that you are witnessing. So as I would see a person in their process, or in the sentiment, or in a dance, or in a contemplation, that you're playing the story as your system, as you feel it, and therefore you can be with it. And it's a wonderful, wonderful freedom, to witness something that is so unlike yourself, and such a mystery. Many people fear these things, but I find them extremely liberating. And somehow a fine melody in an orchestra, in a symphony, is felt very similar to another person in another world, another country, another language, the same or similarly, where there is no boundaries. And I wonder what in us is actually doing the listening. And that's part of the exploration of the music. So music beyond entertainment at this point.
Music beyond entertainment, music as a conversation between you and the tree, or between the life of you and the life of the tree, and then music as a conversation between different inner lives as they are expressed through the various situations and people that you interact with. So in a minute, I'm going to ask if there is any piece that you'd want to play for us that perhaps would sample the idea of some kind of a conversation. But just staying with this idea a little longer, to linger with it just a bit, what else have you discovered then in this idea of music as a conversation, where you become a mediator between different worlds and you use your instrument to translate the story that is exchanged? What are some of the disciplines? What are some of the practices that you needed to develop to actually be able to offer that kind of service, that kind of facility?
Yes. Well, that's a lifetime of things, in the sense that it doesn't stop, and by no means have I arrived at it, because that is part of the pursuit, is to continue to develop what allows a person, or in this sense myself, to be a more skilled listener, a better listener, meaning that once there's one breakthrough, it shows you there's seven more to be, seven more to go. It's the old story of the bear went over the mountain. The bear went over the mountain to see what he could see, and then he saw another mountain. So, except these mountains are not lateral, they are gradients, which of refinement, I would call, or more subtle nuances. Many practices is one, trust in the fact, building trust over a lifetime. It's not something you can say just trust it. It's a practice of finding examples of trust, trusting this instrument, this human design that we live in, and building these little moments of confirmation that are so much to trust, that is extremely constant and reliable and extremely intelligent. I give the example of, and this is not in the music domain, but everything is adjacent, is in the hospital, one of my functions, I have to start IVs on people for injections and whatnot. And half the time, you can't really see the veins in people. So you have to just basically trust and ask your hand to go to where it is. And sometimes I wonder if the training of being a piano player and being able to just allow the fingers to find the notes, because if you try to figure it out and where you want them to go, you can't, it's impossible. And part of the training, well, from the piano, of letting go of my wish to control the circumstance, which many people I think find a hard thing to do. And there's a great freedom in being able to surrender to the intelligence of something else that knows better. The example being like a kidney being able to filtrate water. I wouldn't know where to begin, but to surrender to the fact that if I give the body the water, it'll do what it needs to do with it. So the idea of surrendering with the piano, of not trying to control where the hands go, is a practice of not minding that if I mess up, what people will think, not minding that if I hit some bad notes, what it doesn't matter. These kinds of things, they're subtle areas to also think that I'm not performing, that nothing on the planet that I've ever seen really is performing. There's a lot of trial and error, but not so much performance, waiting to see what other people think about it. And that's a one to be explored, not so easily said maybe in the sentence that I used. But
So trust by way of letting go and surrendering, trust by way of resonance, of letting the instrument lead you and finding the resonance that validates the flow that is inducted in your process. And then trust is ultimately being in that flow where the controlling part, or the part that needs to know, as you say, steps aside and allows something else more intelligent, more in tune, in the interesting sense of more in tune, and more in
exactly.
more connected or attached or in communion, whatever the language that you may use, that enables you to translate the music that is emergent on point. The more I listen to you, the more I decode in what you're describing that music is not something, quote unquote, that you are creating or producing. It's more something you are midwifing or allowing to reveal itself and play itself through you. I don't know if that's the way you will describe it, but that's the sense and the feeling when you put at the center of the creative process, where you are, for all intents and purposes, producing a piece of music that has never been played before in the moment live, whether it's with 10 people or whether it's with 300 people. But you describe it as something that you allow yourself to surrender to, such that the conversation reveals itself through you musically.
Absolutely, it's described very well. I think it's an enigma about this notion of participant and witness turning up again, which is extremely unique about, I think, being human being, because by no means would I want to create the music myself. There's something that probably, it's in many territories, but musicians probably could definitely agree with me in the sense that, you can find a pattern or something that you've played, and you can actually teach yourself to play it quite well by rote, to the point where to someone else it's amazing to them. But to you realize that you're basically playing something you've played over and over. And there can be this fear that there's no more music left. And I think it's a big trap. I think many people can get stopped there. And how arrogant of myself to think that that's after these few pieces, that's it. There's no more music. It's all been played. Mozart had created all of the best music that there ever was and there could be. And these kinds of subtleties that get in can block the fact that the next piece, the next unfelt, unheard, unknown, unput together in such a way piece is an infinite possibility. And the evidence is just in the universe and the size of the universe. And I think when a person surrenders to that idea, there are no completions. There are no fully defined composed pieces. There are segments of starters and catching moments in a moving and expanding and evoluting universe. And it's almost as if the music moment is a pause and a stop, just to go, to take an in-breath, look around to see where you've gone, and you see things around you, and then you start the journey again. And I think the fact that one would continue that type of a process is what makes the difference between music at a level of living experience and exploration to the other side of the bar, where it becomes kind of a dead thing, although it may be entertaining to many people.
Mm. So you're really describing there a whole other different application and usage of music other than entertainment. I don't think you're saying that music is not entertaining, but you're saying, I read in between the lines, that the entertainment aspect is not the first principle. First principle is
Yes.
something else.
I totally agree with, yes, that's definitely what I'm saying. And I'm not saying that music as entertainment doesn't have a place, because it does. And it's all part of it. But I think it's a part of that is not the full picture, that sometimes becomes the full picture.
Mm. So I wonder if there is a conversation, a musical conversation, that you feel inclined to share with us at this point in time, and we can then pick up on the other side of it, perhaps the inquiry about, so what is the first principle of music, and what are some of the practices that one would need to engage in to develop the discipline that you're describing, where there is a witnessing and a participation in the being with the instrument that you are as a human, applied into the what you call domain extension that we know as music. So these are all conversations to be developed. What is a piece? What is a piece? Yeah. What is a piece that would perhaps instantiate the sense of into a conversation? And I don't know if there is something you'd say to introduce the piece, of the circumstance that brought that music up in you. And the one thing else I was going to say to what you just said there, perhaps before we play anything, because the last thing you talked about was this idea of nothing is complete, these are starters, which very much resonates with my idea of every day is a draft. Every moment is a draft in preparation for the next one. And so whatever we're going to listen to is a starter or a draft in process to discover what will the next iteration or the next evolution lead it to. And that's quite all right. The sense that I get when you describe that is one of adventure, discovery, being on the edge of something in ourselves, ready to discover the next moment. That's how I've practically experienced you when in the middle of a workshop or an event, we will come to a point and you don't have the advance notice and I don't have the advance notice, and I'll say, can you play something right here, right now? And the only sense I get is you go into a tremendous sense of concentration inside you, but you're not inside you, you're inside the moment, and within few seconds, a melody, a composition, a piece of music will emerge that was never played before, which amazes me time and again. So what would you share with us at this point? Any piece that you feel ready to share?
Are you talking about playing live right now, or you're talking about?
No, playing something you have recorded that you're ready to share with us.
Okay. Well, I can play a piece that is a starter.
Yeah.
The piece had to do with the exploration of being open, and what does it mean to be open, and where does openness fit inside of these times. And I'm using these hospital analogies, but the analogy was in an anesthesia. I work with pediatric anesthesia and MRI, and I'm responsible to work with the team to acquire images of a patient that is anesthetized and asleep, often children or babies. And you have a whole team working in there. And one morning or one day, I just got this image thinking about openness, that you have a medicine bag, a saline bag or bag full of medicines. And it comes down this tubing with many different locks and places to come in, extensions all the way to the patient, which is pretty far away. And the patient's asleep. And part of the team, the nurses, the physicians that are monitoring this, is a theater unto itself. And these exams can go on for a half hour, 40 minutes. And they're in there putting in medications, monitoring the vital signs. And all of a sudden, I got this sense that the medicine bag, the saline, is the causing realms. It's from the place from which we get our vitamin, that whatever's behind the heart beat, that enigma, it is the bag. The patient is the human design. It's the human model. It's quite a miraculous unto itself. And then the human is the team in the middle that's monitoring the amount of medicines coming through. And all of a sudden, the banter between nurses and staff, if all of a sudden there's a boredom or loss of presence of mind, and one of the locks is still blocked and the medicine isn't quite dripping so well, and you get an alarm on the monitor saying that the patient is suffering a little bit or something's changed, then the person goes, oh, and they unlock something or they give different medications. And I got the sense that life and openness, and the openness of flow between those causing realms and this design in which we find ourselves, the thing that we find ourselves in when we open our eyes each morning and what we actually see, there's something in between that is the journey of life, that is that bridge work between the openness between that medicine bag and the model. And I could go on for hours more about what other parts it started to journey into. But this was the piece of music to accompany some of the feeling that went with it.
The meditative quality of this promoted the following contemplation because of the way you framed this on the front end, which is, so what is the nature of openness? And one realization that occurred in the contemplative inquiry during the music was openness is not emptiness. Openness is not a void. Openness is something that contains presence. And the question is then, what is that nature of presence? And what is it about the presence of a person or a group of people that is conductively open for whatever it is, new information, new appreciation, new sentiment, new challenge, new whatever. Because when we talk about openness, we're talking about something coming into the system in the way you were describing with a patient from outside of itself. But there has to be something that's present there to receive. And so that sense of what is it that allows openness and the power of the contemplation is that we're obviously living through a time where we are permanently under siege and pressure from so many different directions. And so the psychological, the mental, the energetic posture of most people when they wake up in the morning is they're all the time in one form or another at an unconscious level protecting to not be open. There is so many things they don't want to be open to. So what is the quality of openness that you are trying to sense into here that's core for human life? Because in the entire way you tell the story, all the way from your conversation with the tree, where music started to appear, and then you using music as a medium in different situations to facilitate those situations. They describe a chosen openness, or a facilitated openness, or a directed openness, not openness for everything or to everything, but an openness that has a certain efficacy and certain attunement to it. All that is what emerged in listening to the music with the way you framed it on the front end.
Each one of us has precious moments in life. And what if you were able to capture a precious moment in life and be able to store it, and when you need it, re-evoke it again, not only for oneself, but to share with others. And one of the kind of side amazing things about music, and even in recorded music in some sense, is that I found I could store when I was having and do have very intimately what you might call spiritual moments, or moments of feeling very full and purposeful and significant inside of a much greater picture, with a very freeing sense of humility and integration, and being part of something without having to claim it or identify it or with it. And then being able to encapsulate that moment, that living feeling, that thread, into something that has defined, like a piece of music. And then when it's needed, you can unzip it, so to speak, and the feeling comes out, where it becomes a technology that life is a very challenging array. We know this in life. So everything is a constant struggle of many things, some natural and some unfortunately have become unnatural, but nonetheless they're there. And in those moments when we are not at our strengths, or when I'm not at its strength, or when, as you explained, the notion of trying to keep everything out, you can unzip that feeling, that moment when harmonies were right, and immediately tune, just like the laws of physics would say about anything tuning on the same frequency, tune to that strength. And from the place of strength, be able to deal with whatever it is that one is confronted with from a very different place. And that is a technology or a practice that music has become for my life. So immediately when I find myself in a very moved place, I run to the piano to be with it long enough that I can etch into myself a link to that feeling. And then I've discovered over the years that you can share that music with someone else. And even though we're so very different and each person's feelings are different, there's something that's the same. And that can transfer in the music. And it can take someone almost on a little bit of a ride to a place that you went to, and start a process in them from the sameness of things in us that are mysteries unto all of us, I believe. And I believe that's another aspect of the arts, not just music, that we share with each other that is profound, because then it speaks about the great variety and difference that is amazing, but it's also held together by a sameness, which is it's the holder, it's the glue that says to me that ultimately trust is demonstrated to us all the time, and that truly in the struggle of learning about one's existence and the whole exploration of it, all is truly well.
You were describing there the technology of capturing, zipping a moment in time, an experience, a state, an enhanced state, a culmination of an augmentation of feelings and sentiments. So you will rush to the piano or be near the piano to access that and zip the experience in the new expression that's emergent in the moment on the one side of the equation, and then how whatever experience, feeling, atmospheric nature, energetic quality was zipped into that file musically or in any other artistic media, it can be unzipped for somebody else to access the quality, the nutriment that was initially captured. And so when you describe that second move, it begins to open the whole consideration of the functional utility of purposeful or functional music, sometimes used for healing or to introduce particular states that will be facilitative for whatever kind of work you may need to do, whether it's perception-based work, sentiment-based work, inquiry-based work, dialogue, conflict resolution-based work, whatever the body of work that's in front of us can actually be enhanced on the front end and through the process. A bit like you're describing that drip, drip, drip to the anesthetized patient. We're all, through our experiences, semi-anesthetized and could use the enhancement when we embark on whatever it is that we are embarking to do. So I've always found music to be the fastest pathway to a change of mood or a change of state or a change of mental configuration, or to facilitate a transition from one experience to the other. And in that sense, is one of the greatest gifts of the gods to us here in this planetary realm. And so the power in what you're relaying there is the humility and confidence. And when you experience something that is uniquely, you could say, personal in the moment, as you were describing, perhaps one of the most intimate moments of you feeling with something, but it may be very personal and very impersonal in the sense that there is access in your process to something that could be a nutriment to many other humans, and your capacity to capture it and then share it is a profound gift. Beautiful. I have the sense that today we can live it, unless there is something you're going to say here, but I have the sense of today living it right there at the edge of a cliff, to pick up the conversation another time, because what happened today, you shared so many starter thoughts and ideas that we could come back to and open up further. What do you mean by this, or what do you mean by that I'd like to on perhaps next conversations. But again, we didn't know that we were going to record today. This was us just catching up, and all of this just happened in an unrehearsed, unplanned way, and that's the beauty of this kind of conversation, which is just another kind of music.
Absolutely. Yes, it is.